The author of this podcast is not engaged in rendering professional medical advice or services to the individual listener. The ideas, procedures, and suggestions contained within this podcast are not intended as a substitute for consulting with a medical professional. All matters regarding your health and fitness require medical consultation and supervision. The author shall not be liable or responsible for any loss or damage allegedly arising from any information or suggestions within this podcast. You, as a listener of this podcast, are totally and completely responsible for your own health and health care. Your results may vary. Testimonials and examples used are exceptional results and are not intended to guarantee, promise, represent, and or assure that anyone will achieve the same similar results. These statements have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. These things that we discuss are not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease. Results may vary depending on starting point, goal, and effort. Exercise and proper diet are necessary to achieve and maintain weight loss for muscle definition. The testimonials featured may have used more than one product or extended the program to achieve their maximum results. Consult your physician and follow all safety instructions before beginning any exercise program or nutrition plan or using any supplement or meal replacement product, especially if you are pregnant, breastfeeding, or have any other medical conditions, or are taking any medication. The content within this podcast is for informational purposes only and is not intended to diagnose any medical condition, replace the advice of healthcare professionals, or provide any medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Copyright 2020 Fireteam Whiskey, LLC, all rights reserved.
Hey guys, welcome to the Warrior Wellness Podcast, a podcast for military members, veterans, and first responders focusing on fitness, health, nutrition, and biohacking. Our mission with this podcast is to introduce America's heroes to lifestyle habits and hacks that will help them live healthier, happier lives, and in turn be fit enough to continue their support of their communities and country. I am your host, Captain Stephanie Lincoln. I am a former Army National Guard soldier, and I own the military and first responder health and fitness business, Fireteam Whiskey. So Fireteam Whiskey's mission is to introduce first responders and military members and veterans to the nutritional and fitness hacks and the warrior wellness hacks needed in order to better serve our communities and country. So even if you no longer wear the uniform and you're no longer serving in that capacity, you could still be a good servant to your family members, your children, your spouse, the people at your job, your career, your goals and dreams in life by taking care of your mind, body, and spirit. So we feel so passionate about this and introducing these specific tips and tricks that you can implement into your daily lives. You don't have to be Dave Asprey. You don't have to own a $10,000 infrared sauna. You can do little things each day to make sure that you're making some progress towards lifelong health and happiness. So I'm so glad that you joined us. This is our very first episode of the Warrior Wellness Podcast. And we have tons and tons and tons of information for you. But I don't want you to feel overwhelmed. I want you to feel like every time you listen to our podcast that you got something, even if it's just a tiny little thing, that you can do today and start doing maybe every day, hopefully, in order to better improve your life. So we're just looking to introduce you to some tidbits. So you don't have to go out and run a 100-mile endurance race. You don't have to, do a 300 challenge where you do 100 pull-ups and 100 burpees and 100 push-ups. If you're there right now and you're ready to do that shit, let's do it. But if you're not and you're like, dude, I can just barely get out of bed, we're talking to you too. So this isn't just for, the elite athletes, the special forces, the SWAT guys. We are talking to you even if you are 60 pounds overweight, you've got 2 knee replacements, you have aches and pains, and you're struggling with a lot of medical issues. We're talking to you too. So we're going to be introducing to you to some concepts each and every week with this podcast that I hope you can just take whatever you want from it, even if it's just a tiny little thing, or a huge thing, and make it a goal and start progressing towards that. That's what we want to do for you, because you served your countries and you served your communities, and maybe you're still serving. And the heartbreaking thing about this, and what inspired me to start this business, Fireteam Whiskey, was the fact that our America's heroes are suffering. And they're suffering from chronic disease. And they're suffering from chronic disease because, a lot of times, because of the service that they provided to their communities and country. So basically, it's a punishment. And I worked in the field of, after I got out of the Army, I worked running medical contracts within the Army and the Air Force. And what I learned from that 10 years of doing it is that, we're doing the wrong thing. The military, DOD in general, is not addressing this issue in the way that it should be, and it's not addressing it fast enough. So I don't want to bum you out, but I want to use this very first podcast to really set the stage, as you will, as how much of a crisis we are in the first responder, military member, and veteran community. So we all know that, and maybe you don't, about 75% of America is overweight or obese. Let me just let you marinate on that. So a severe majority, is basically metabolically unhealthy, all right? Has a metabolic disease. If you are overweight and you're listening to me right now, you have a metabolic disease, right? So, and you may not believe that. It's true. That's science. So you have a metabolic disease. So you are diseased. You have a chronic health issue because of a lot of things, which we're going to touch upon in the many following weeks in this podcast. So we won't dive right into that right away, but we're going to talk about a lot of those daily life hacks you can implement to start chipping away at that disease and become healthy again. And guess what? That's the bottom line here, guys, is you can get healthy again. There is hope. I hate when I especially hear from veterans where they say, well, no, my doctor said I'll have this for the rest of my life. My doctor said I'm going to, just have to be on these pills for the rest of my life. And that is a downright effing lie. And yes, we will curse on this podcast. So, we're military members and first responders, so it may happen every once in a while. It's a lie, and it's a devastating lie, because if you had hope, maybe you would do some things in order to improve your health. So if I just look at, I'm a big hiker, right? And I use this analogy all the time. If I look at a mountaintop, right? And I've done this a couple times where I'm like, I look up at, I was hiking, in Tahoe, and they had this mountain that was a really hard hike, and it was basically going straight up for about 5 hours, right? Only took me about 2 hours to get down, but it took me about 5 hours to get up. So I'm looking at this peak and I'm like, holy shit. And it intimidates you, right? And I think that happens in these medical providers, as much as they're trying to help, I think in a lot of ways they hurt, because they say, well, no, you have diabetes. You're going to have this for the rest of your life. Statistically, that's true, because the unfortunate part of it is diabetes type 2 is completely curable. Completely. But doctors don't say that. Most doctors don't. They say, well, this is a condition you're going to have the rest of your life, and these are the things that it's going to lead to, and we are going to try and mitigate this with all these medications, right? But what they never say, what they almost never say, I hardly ever hear that providers say, and I work with a lot of people with diabetes or pre-diabetes, and they say, no, well, my doctor just said I was just going to have this. They never said that it was actually curable. Why didn't they tell me that? Because statistically, most likely, the person who is diagnosed with type 2 diabetes is not going to improve because they don't implement the things that they need to implement in order to cure themselves, because it is a lifestyle change that they are required to do. And based on 75% of our nation being obese and overweight, which is completely preventable as well, obviously the lifestyle change is the quote unquote impossible part, which makes the doctors say to you, you're going to have this for the rest of your life. But they don't remind you that, hey, guess what? This is a curable disease. And a lot of the chronic health diseases out there are curable or completely reversible or very much mitigated by lifestyle changes. So this is what we're going to introduce to you in this podcast. And we're specifically talking to military members, veterans, and first responders because of the unique experiences and exposures that you guys have had, that we have had. I'm a veteran too, have had. So, we have overly exposed to more than, the average American to stress, to sleep deprivation, to toxins, especially heavy metals and radiation and EMF signals. So asbestos is another one that we can go on and on about the toxins that specifically military members and first responders alone have so much more of in their lifetimes compared to just like an average American working in a cubicle somewhere, right? So these are especially important for you guys, for us. So this is why we're so passionate about spreading the word about these hacks that you can do just every single day that are practical, right? That you can actually, average Joe Schmo out there can do these things and improve their health for the long term. So I want to give you the foundation, though. Why are we talking about this, and why is it so, I believe, and I don't understand why this isn't on every headline when you turn on the news, why this is not viewed as a national security crisis. It is a crisis. Our nation is in a health crisis. And what I wake up every day for is to chip away at it with my tiny little toothpick. I feel like I'm chipping away at a huge mountain with a toothpick, right? This is a overwhelming burden, just like looking up at that mountain, right? But what I hope you guys get from our podcast is that you can overcome this mountain. Our nation can overcome this mountain. You as an individual, if you've been diagnosed with diabetes or any, immune disorder or metabolic issue, or even if it's just bad hips, bad knees, bad back, all that kind of stuff, that you look at that burden and say, you know what, this is surmountable. I can get over this hump. I can make my life as best as possible with introducing some holistic life hacks here. So I'm not going to be talking about pills. I'm not going to be talking about surgeries. I'm not going to be talking about miracle cures. I'm going to be talking about long-term progressive things that if you put these into your daily life, it will 100% improve the way you feel. It will improve your health. So, some of us are starting with a much more heavier burden than others, but we all can make progress is the point. So let me lay the foundation and why this is such a crisis in our military member first responder community. So 8 out of 10 police are overweight. That's the statistic. 8 out of 10 people, 8 out of 10. And so how does this affect them, right? And you see the overweight, I see the overweight cops out there all the time. And we travel in an RV and we go and visit local police stations and sheriff's offices and talk with local police. And I can definitely see this out there, boots on the ground. A majority of them are overweight. And why? Because they're, it's most of them are very sedentary jobs. They do a lot of sitting in their cars, and there's not much activity, right? When there is activity, it's very quick, right? It is a sprint. It's a struggle. It's a huge shock on the body. It's a quick and very impactful, stressful movement. So, if they're struggling with a suspect or being attacked or whatever it is, it's a huge stress on the body rather than just like getting up and kind of warming up and stretching and going for a jog, taking it easy for the first couple miles, and then I kind of build up to it, right? It's like you go from doing nothing to overwhelming movements, right? Which makes you much more susceptible to injury. Absolutely. Going from just sit to boom, like struggling for your life, basically. Same thing with firefighters. So they're sitting around the firehouse. Same thing with military members. You're sitting on fire watch and boom, it's like you are moving, you are shooting, you have this huge flood of stress on your body, and it just happens. And then you're lifting things, you're jumping, you're moving, you're sprinting, whatever it may be. It is a quick but impactful, stressful movement. So nobody else has jobs like this, guys. Nobody else does, right? So this is why military members, first responders, police, they get injured, and even I worked in prison, so even working in the prison system, it happened all the time. So you're more susceptible to injury. So if you're already overweight, if you're already out of shape, if your body is already inflamed and it has high cortisol levels and high insulin and high blood sugar and highly inflamed, guess what this stressor is going to do to your body? It's going to make a huge impact rather than somebody who's, just like kind of, going to basically to go to work out, because they don't get into those situations. Almost half of the firefighters who die in the line of duty die of heart attacks. So we see why, right? We just talked about how quickly these impacts and how hard these impacts, these stressors can happen. And the recruiting issue is another huge issue. 1 out of 3 Americans ages 17 to 24, which is the prime recruiting age, cannot enlist in the military because of their medical health issues, which is obesity and fitness. So the top reason why somebody cannot get in the military is because of chronic health issues, mental health issues, and also obesity. And then the failure to be able to meet fitness standards. And then the third one is legal problems. So they've been arrested or been in trouble with the law or whatever, which we won't be addressing. That's not what we're talking about. All right. So another study published in the American Journal of Preventive Medicine, and this was huge, found that, so we're talking about active duty now, right? So people were like, oh, okay, well, veterans, they kind of let themselves go. All right. Active duty service members, the amount has increased from just 2011 by 73%. So we're talking about not that long ago. 2011, it's 2020 right now as the year that I'm speaking. Risen from 2011 to now 73%. Whoa. This is huge, guys. So this isn't just something that's just been kind of gradually increasing over time. This has been the avalanche. It's just like the avalanche was just a bomb went off somewhere back then, and the avalanche is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So it's not slowing down, it's speeding up. That huge spinning ball of chaos and horrific chronic health disease is getting bigger and moving faster within the ranks of our active duty military. And we're not just talking about daily suffering, right? I mean, daily suffering is horrific, and we're also talking about mental health as well. And in 2020, now last 2019 was the highest suicide rate. So it used to be, we used to say 20 veterans a day commit suicide. Now it's up to 22. So the number is continuing to tick up. 2019 was the worst year ever for veteran suicide. So we're not just talking about daily suffering. We're talking about a huge economic epidemic impact, right? So it's not just the daily suffering of our veterans, but we're talking about huge costs to ourselves as a nation, as a nation for productivity, as a financial burden on our nation. So, active duty, the active duty military receives medical care, right? And it said in this report that I'm looking at, overweight and obesity issues and issues related to that. So, we're talking about injuries, we're talking about chronic health disease, are responsible for 658,000 missed work days a year. 658,000 missed work days in a year because of just crappy nutrition, crappy fitness, overweight, and obesity, right? So, an average person misses 17 work days a year because of being overweight and obese. So, if you are not overweight and obese and you're healthy, the person sitting right next to me who's overweight and obese on average misses 17 more days of work than I do from illness and issues related to that. And then the estimated productivity costs of those lost work days is $105 million a year. So we're losing money in productivity alone. And let's not even talk about TRICARE. So active duty and then the VA care alone spends 1.1 billion with a B dollars annually. We're just talking about treating obesity related illness. Obesity related illness. That's it. So we're not talking about everything else. They extracted just the treatment dollars for obesity related illnesses. So we're talking about type 2 diabetes treatments. We're talking about renal failure, dialysis issues. We're talking about infections and wound care. That's huge. I have a buddy of mine that I was in the Army with who that's what they specialize in. That's what he does for a living is diabetes wound care and related issues. And, diabetes is also related to chronic heart conditions, strokes, and cancer. So those are all kind of balled up. Billions of dollars annually are spent taking care of veterans who have these issues that really could have been mainly mitigated. And, what's really sad is 1 in 4 veterans receiving VA care is a type 2 diabetic. So if you go into a VA waiting room and you look at 4 guys, 4 people in there, at least 1 in 4 of them, I think the statistic actually, it might even be 50% at this point almost. So again, we're talking about a completely preventable and completely treatable disease. Yet our military members, veterans, and first responders are being told that this is something that they have to suffer with for the rest of their lives, which is not true. So this is this national security crisis. So not only are our young people sicker and not able to serve, but our active duty service members are getting sicker earlier and having to get out of the military because of these issues, and then of course receiving lifelong care. But then the problem is we don't have as many people to fill those empty spots coming in, the young people, as the people who are having to leave in droves because of their medical issues. So this is the epidemic that we're talking about, that we're addressing with Fireteam Whiskey. And this is what gets me out of bed every single day, guys. So I'm not just, talking about the problem, but we're talking about the need for a culture shift. It's and you're starting to see it in general media, but we need to just say as a nation that we don't accept this anymore, and that we are not going to continue on this avalanche, speeding up here with this epidemic sweeping across our nation, that we're going to put our foot down. And I'm hoping with the collective motivation of veterans, military members, and first responders, that we say not no, but hell no. And that you get up every single day and say, hell no, I'm not going to continue on this path. I'm going to get better. I'm not accepting the fact that my doctor told me that I'm going to suffer for the rest of my life. And I know there are things that I can do every single day, and I'm going to make them a priority in order to get on that path of long-term health and wellness. So I'm excited to start this podcast with you all, and I look forward to bringing you those small little bites of biohacking and health and wellness that you can do today. And so when you listen to this podcast and you say, man, I'm going to do this today, I'm going to make this happen, I'm going to put it on my calendar as a calendar reminder every single day to do this one small thing, and we can add those up and go with you on this journey over time, where you can look back, maybe a year from now and say, dang, look at that. I've lost 15 pounds. I'm actually mentally feeling less foggy. I'm, feeling healthier. I've improved my body composition. I'm just feeling, I'm happier and less stressed out. Or maybe, you hit a huge victory, like, wow, I did 5 pull-ups, or, I've never been able to do pull-ups before. Whatever it may be, we're proud and humbled enough to be partnering with you to help you achieve your health and fitness goals. So thanks for joining the Warrior Wellness Podcast. I'm Captain Stephanie Lincoln, and we will see you at the next episode.